Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're taking a truly extraordinary journey, one that sweeps us back over 2.5 millennia. We're going to peer into the astonishing mind of a pivotal figure from ancient Greece.
Yeah, and this isn't just about, dusty history or philosophical footnotes.
Not at all. It's really a profound exploration of how humanity first dared to grapple with the universe's biggest, most fundamental questions. Think of it as witnessing the birth pangs of Western philosophy and scientific thought. I mean, it set the stage for virtually everything that followed.
Indeed. We're talking about Anaximander, a towering figure of the Miletus school. He was a direct student of Thales, who many consider the very first philosopher, and also the teacher of Anaximenes, another significant early thinker.
Right.
Anaximander's significance really cannot be overstated. He was a genuine pioneer in what we'd now categorize as cosmology and natural philosophy. He was truly pushing the boundaries of what was considered knowable through reason, rather than just, handed down myth.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to really unpack Anaximander's truly revolutionary concepts. We'll delve into his life, explore the vibrant times he lived in, and try to understand precisely how his thinking marked such a radical, monumental shift. This was the moment humanity began that transition, moving from mythological explanations of the world, driven by divine will, towards rational, systematic inquiry based on observation and logic.
Yeah, that mythos to logos shift.
Exactly. Our goal is for you to walk away with a crystal clear understanding of what made his ideas so groundbreaking for his era, and why, remarkably, they continue to resonate with our modern scientific and philosophical worldview even today.
And prepare for some truly surprising insights along the way. We'll definitely be discussing his astonishing theory about the Earth's position in the cosmos long before anyone understood gravity or orbital mechanics.
Right. It's a concept that almost defies common sense even now, but it was profoundly logical for him based on his reasoning.
And we'll touch on his shockingly early thoughts on how life, including humans, might have first come to be, an idea that, in some ways, remarkably echoes later evolutionary theories.
Predating Darwin by thousands of years. It's going to be quite a deep dive.
It really is.
So to truly appreciate Anaximander's genius, I think we first need to understand the unique crucible from which his ideas emerged. So let's unpack this fascinating backdrop. Miletus. Okay, let's unpack this fascinating backdrop. Miletus wasn't just a dot on a map. It was a buzzing hub, truly a multicultural environment that probably made thinkers like Anaximander ask really universal questions. What was it about this specific place, this ancient city-state, that fostered such profoundly revolutionary thought?
That's precisely where we need to start. Miletus, located in Ionia on the Aegean coast in what is modern-day Aydin, Turkey, it was a vibrant and extraordinarily wealthy city-state back in the 6th century BCE. Its geographical location was incredibly strategic, almost perfectly positioned as a major center for trade and culture. It wasn't just some local trading post, you see. It was a nexus, a genuine crossroads connecting diverse cultures across the Mediterranean and beyond.
So, like the ancient world's grand central station, maybe, not just for goods, but for ideas, technologies, perspectives, too.
That's actually an excellent analogy, yeah.
Yeah.
Its extensive maritime trade routes stretched far and wide, connecting Miletus with established civilizations like Mesopotamia, with their advanced astronomical observations and mathematical systems.
Right.
And Egypt, with its ancient wisdom and monumental architecture in various other parts of Anatolia and the Greek world. This wasn't merely about exchanging commodities like pottery or olive oil.
They're much more than that.
Exactly. It was about the constant influx of different knowledge systems, diverse mythologies, contrasting cultural perspectives. Imagine the myths from different pantheons, the astronomical charts from Babylon, practical mathematical techniques from Egypt, all converging in this one dynamic place. This continuous cross-pollination created an incredibly fertile ground, a unique melting pot that stimulated intellectual curiosity and encouraged synthesis, questioning. Thinkers like Anaximander weren't isolated. They were exposed to this vast array of human understanding, which probably challenged them to find common, universal truths amidst all that diversity.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But what about the political environment? Because surely you need a certain amount of stability or maybe even freedom for this kind of abstract, often challenging thought to really flourish rather than just get stamped out.
You've hit on a crucial point there. While Miletus was indeed under the influence of the powerful Persian Empire during this period, it largely maintained a significant degree of autonomy. It was mostly a self-governing city-state.
Ah, okay.
And this relative freedom meant that a rich economic life, fueled by that extensive trade we just discussed, could flourish relatively unhindered. And with economic prosperity often comes, well, the luxury of leisure, right? The space for intellectual pursuits.
Time to think beyond just survival.
Exactly. This meant thinkers weren't solely focused on immediate survival, day-to-day practicalities, or constant political struggles. They could actually engage in independent thought, speculative inquiry, abstract contemplation about the universe. Some sources even suggest that the very fact of Persian dominance, this external authority, paradoxically might have encouraged Ionian thinkers to reflect more deeply on universal order and natural laws.
Huh. That's a truly fascinating insight. It's almost as if the imposition of one human order made them seek a more fundamental natural order.
It's a possibility, certainly. It's this search for principles of order that existed outside of human control or, imperial decree.
So Anaximander himself, beyond being this profound abstract philosopher, he was also deeply involved in practical stuff. We hear he was a cartographer, an astronomer, maybe even a true proto-scientist. But how much do we actually know about him directly? It feels like a lot of these ancient figures are sort of shrouded in mystery.
Unfortunately, you're right about that. Our direct knowledge is incredibly scarce. His original works, which reputedly filled volumes, are almost entirely lost to us. We don't have his own words, his original manuscripts.
Well, nothing.
Pretty much nothing direct. Our understanding of his ideas comes primarily from what later, sometimes much later, philosophers like Aristotle and his student Theophrastus wrote about him, plus some historical accounts from figures like Herodotus, the father of history, and Diogenes Laertius, who compiled biographies of ancient philosophers much later on.
So we're always dealing with interpretation then, layers of it.
Always,
Yeah.
which in a way makes the enduring power and influence of his ideas even more remarkable. It's a real testament to their inherent strength that they survive through these secondary accounts.
It's almost like trying to piece together a magnificent mosaic from just a few scattered tiles found in different places, a challenging but rewarding endeavor.
That's a perfect analogy. What we do know through these secondary sources is that Anaximander not only built upon but significantly expanded the speculative approach of his teacher, Thales.
Thales, the water guy.
Exactly. Thales famously posited water as the fundamental principle or underlying substance of the universe. And Anaximander took this inquiry a massive step further, moving towards a far more systematic and abstract cosmology. He profoundly expanded the lineage of Milesian thought.
But he wasn't just stuck in his head. Right, you mentioned practical things too.
Right. As you said, he wasn't confined to abstract philosophy alone. He was reputedly the first to draw a world map, a revolutionary achievement, which would have been crucial for Miletus's extensive trade economy and its burgeoning naval power.
Makes sense.
He also utilized a gnomon, which is essentially a sundial, to measure time and meticulously study seasonal cycles. This indicates a keen interest in systematic observation and practical astronomy. He was renowned as a general observer of nature, a keen student of the world around him.
So it paints a picture of him not just as a philosopher, but as a genuine early scientist, maybe, seamlessly integrating empirical observation with theoretical thought.
I think that's fair to say. A
Yep.
proto-scientist, certainly.
What's truly fascinating here is how his practical pursuits as a cartographer or an astronomer weren't just separate hobbies, but were deeply intertwined with his philosophical inquiry. They appear to have all been part of a singular, comprehensive, and rational approach to understanding the world around him. This raises an important question for me. How much did those practical hands-on observations, like charting coastlines or meticulously tracking the movements of stars, directly feed into his grand, sweeping cosmic theories? Did seeing patterns in the physical world reinforce his belief in underlying order?
I believe they absolutely did, and in a profound way. I mean, the very act of mapping the known world, for instance, requires a belief in consistent, measurable space, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
It demands a systematic ordering of geographical information, moving beyond just, stories of travel. Similarly, observing the regular, predictable patterns of the sun and stars over seasons and years, or charting the passage of time with a gnomon, that would have powerfully reinforced a belief in an underlying order, a discernible cosmos, rather than a world governed by arbitrary, unpredictable forces.
Right, it pushes you towards natural explanations.
Exactly. This practical experience would have made him seek natural, consistent explanations for phenomena, rather than resorting to mythological ones, which often relied on the whims of deities. Which brings us perfectly to that truly pivotal moment, one that Anaximander was central to, the dawn of rational thought, that epical shift from mythos to logos.
This is a phrase that comes up so often when we talk about the intellectual revolution of ancient Greece, the mythos to logos transition. For those who might not be entirely familiar, what exactly does that mean, and why was Anaximander so profoundly central to it? What was the world like before he started asking these
Well,
questions?
before Anaximander and the other Milesian thinkers, the prevailing explanations for the universe, for natural phenomena, for human existence, were overwhelmingly mythological. Think of the epic poems of Homer, or the theological narratives of Hesiod.
Right, the gods did everything.
Pretty much. In these tales, gods like Zeus controlled the lightning, Poseidon commanded the seas, and the world itself was seen as a direct product of divine will, often shaped by chaotic primordial forces, or the conflicts between these, well, very human-like deities. That was the mythos. A rich tapestry of narratives involving divine intervention, fate, and cosmic drama.
Okay.
The logos, on the other hand, represents explanations rooted in observation, reason, and speculative inquiry. It was a conscious movement away from divine intervention as the primary explanatory principle and towards identifying inherent natural laws and underlying causes.
So it's not just telling a different story, it's fundamentally moving from a God did it to how does this actually work? A complete shift in intellectual methodology.
Precisely. And Miletus's unique environment, as we've discussed, was the perfect incubator for this momentous shift. That constant trade meant exposure to a multitude of different mythologies. If one culture had one set of gods and creation stories, and another had entirely different ones, well, it would naturally lead open-minded thinkers to question the universality of any single mythological explanation, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you'd start asking which one is right, or maybe neither.
Or maybe there's something deeper, something universal underlying all of it. It would push them to seek universal principles that transcended specific cultural narratives, principles they could apply to all observable reality, regardless of one's cultural background.
And the political freedom helped too.
The relative political autonomy definitely allowed for a degree of intellectual freedom not found in more rigidly theocratic societies. And as we said, economic prosperity provided the time, resources, and mental space for thinkers to move beyond purely practical problems towards these big abstract questions about universal order and natural laws.
It reflects that deep human search for order, right? For truths outside of human control.
Exactly. A quest for foundational truths that exist independently of human control or even divine whim. This is truly the moment when philosophy, as we understand the systematic pursuit of wisdom through reason, begins to take its first confident steps.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly for us. Now let's get into the absolute core of Anaximander's truly revolutionary thinking. His foundational principle, the Ep.2. This is where it gets really interesting. Anaximander wasn't content with just water as the fundamental building block like his teacher Thales, or even air or fire. He took a truly massive, unprecedented intellectual leap into pure abstraction. What was this leap, and why was it so profoundly important for the trajectory of Western thought?
It was, without question, a monumental leap. Thales, as you mentioned, proposed water as the arche, the fundamental principle. But Anaximander saw a critical problem with this.
Which was?
Well, if the arche was a specific defined substance like water, how could it explain its own opposite, say fire? Or how could a single specific substance transform into everything else in the universe without losing its own identity or just being used up?
Good point. You can't get fire from water directly.
Not easily, no. So, his central philosophical contribution was identifying this arche, not as a specific material substance, but as something far more abstract, something that existed beyond the realm of immediate sensory experience, the epeiron.
And what exactly does apeiron mean? I know it's Greek, but give us the full sense of its implications. It sounds like such a simple word, but it carries so much weight.
It really does. Epeiron literally translates from Greek as limitless, boundless, or indeterminate. It's crucial to understand that it's not a specific material like water or air or earth or even fire. It is by definition not a specific, observable, or finite substance. It literally means without paras, without boundary or definition.
So it's not something you can point to, measure, weigh, or even directly perceive with your senses. It's a conceptual entity, a principle rather than a thing.
Exactly. And its characteristics are what make it so profoundly revolutionary and truly groundbreaking. Firstly, its limitlessness. Anaximander conceived of the apeiron as infinite in both space and time.
Infinite. How did he justify that?
His logic here was quite compelling. If the fundamental substance, the source of everything, were limited, It couldn't possibly account for the endless diversity, the constant change, and the sheer vastness observed throughout the universe. A finite principle, he reasoned, could only produce finite things.
Okay, that makes sense.
To explain an infinitely diverse and ever-changing cosmos, which he observed, you need an infinite source. This truly abstract concept of boundlessness allowed for a dynamic, ever-unfolding universe rather than a static or finite one that would eventually just run out of steam.
Right. If everything comes from something, that something has to be expansive enough, vast enough, to contain the potential for everything.
Precisely. Secondly, and perhaps even more remarkably, is its indeterminacy. The apiaron possesses no specific qualities itself. It's not hot or cold, wet or dry, solid or liquid, light or dark.
None of the qualities we see in the world.
Exactly. This very lack of specific attributes is precisely what allows it to be the ultimate source of all qualities and all opposites. If it were, say, primarily hot, how could it then give rise to cold without fundamentally changing its nature or being somehow diminished?
Right, it would be limited by its own nature.
By being indeterminate, by containing no defining characteristics of its own, it holds the potential for everything without being defined or limited by any single characteristic. It's the ultimate blank slate, the primordial, undifferentiated potential from which all specific forms and qualities emerge.
So it's not water, it's not fire. It's the potential for water and fire and earth and air and everything else in the universe to manifest from it.
Yes, that's an excellent way to put it. It is the boundless, undifferentiated source from which all existing things are born through a process he called separation or apokrysis. And, importantly, it's also what they eventually return to in a continuous cycle.
Separation. How did that work?
He saw it as a dynamic process. The universe, with all its specific forms, qualities, and opposing elements like hot and cold, wet and dry, emerged from this ageless, indeterminate source through this separation. It's a continuous, dynamic process of coming into being and dissolving back into the apiron, sort of like waves on an endless ocean. Now, if we connect this to the bigger picture of philosophical development, the apiron is arguably the first truly metaphysical concept in Western philosophy.
Right.
Before Anaximander, the focus was primarily on what we might call material monism, identifying a single physical substance like water. But with the apiron, he introduces a concept that exists beyond the tangible, the immediately observable, the purely physical. Think about it. He's laying the groundwork for later ideas like Plato's forms.
Those perfect, unchanging ideals.
Right, or even Aristotle's prime mover. He was the first to theorize a universal principle that isn't reducible to a simple physical property. It set philosophy on an entirely new, abstract path, which raises an important question, really. How did he, without any prior philosophical frameworks to such a concept, arrive at something so profoundly abstract? It speaks volumes about the power of pure, rational thought, kind of untethered from immediate observation.
And it sets the stage for a universe that operates under its own internal logic, not by divine whim, doesn't it? Which brings us beautifully to Anaximander's cosmic vision. His idea of the universe as a cosmos governed by a fascinating concept of justice. This is a very powerful and almost poetic concept for someone in the 6th century BCE to articulate.
It is, and it's truly groundbreaking. Anaximander's view of the universe as a cosmos, meaning an ordered, harmonious, and beautiful system, was a direct and radical challenge to those chaotic, God-driven mythological narratives that had dominated thought for millennia.
Right. Instead of Zeus throwing thunderbolts.
Exactly. Instead of random acts of divine will or the unpredictable interventions of gods, he saw an inherent, intrinsic order, a kind of self-regulating balance within the universe itself.
So not just physical order, but a kind of moral order, a cosmic justice, or dike, as the Greeks called it. That seems like quite a leap from just physical laws.
It is a leap, but it's how he framed the underlying principle maintaining this universal balance. It wasn't about gods punishing people in a human sense, but about an intrinsic, immanent self-regulation within the universe. His most famous surviving fragment, which has been quoted and reinterpreted for centuries, encapsulates this beautifully.
What does it say?
It states, roughly translated, "Beings must return to where they originated, for they must pay the penalty and retribution to each other for their injustices according to the ordinance of time."
Wow, that's deep. Injustices against one another. What exactly does that mean in the context of the universe? How do elements commit injustice?
Well, it's an anthropomorphic way of explaining fundamental natural processes. It's almost like giving agency to the elements themselves. Think of those elemental opposites that separated out from the apiron. Hot and cold, wet and dry, light and dark.
Okay.
Anaximander believed that these opposites were constantly vying for dominance, encroaching upon each other's territory, so to speak. If, for example, hot overpowers or expands at the expense of cold like in summer, or dry overpowers wet and causes drought, a temporary imbalance and injustice occurs.
Oh, I see. An imbalance.
But time and the inherent natural processes will inevitably restore balance. According to the ordinance of time, as the fragment says. For instance, too much heat might eventually lead to dryness and then maybe fire, which consumes itself, or an excess of wetness leads to floods that eventually recede, allowing dryness to return. It's a dynamic equilibrium.
A self-correcting system.
Exactly. Any temporary dominance or injustice is naturally rectified through a compensatory reaction. This demonstrates a universe that is fundamentally self-regulating, governed by these immanent laws of balance, rather than by external divine intervention. It's a profound precursor to our modern understanding of natural forces balancing each other, maintaining homeostasis, whether we're talking about climate or ecosystems.
That's absolutely incredible. He's essentially describing a universe with its own built-in thermostat, a sort of cosmic checks and balances system. And speaking of the universe, his actual model of the cosmos itself was truly revolutionary. The idea that the Earth is just floating, unsupported in the center, that's genuinely mind-blowing when you consider the prevailing beliefs of his time.
It was an astonishing and profoundly audacious theory. Before Anaximander, common mythological beliefs across various cultures held that the Earth rested on something, maybe a giant turtle, mighty pillars, maybe it floated on a primordial ocean.
Right, something solid.
Always something concrete, physical. Anaximander's radical departure was his assertion that the Earth is suspended, unsupported in the center of the universe. And this wasn't just a wild guess. He had a remarkably elegant rationalization for it.
And what was his reasoning? How did he justify such a bold claim without any concept of gravity as we know it?
He invokes the principle of symmetry. He argued that the Earth remains balanced because it is precisely equidistant from all parts of the cosmos. There's no inherent reason for it to move in one direction more than another because it's symmetrically positioned relative to everything around it. It has no up or down to fall towards, in his view, because down would imply a specific direction or a support to fall onto, which he argued wasn't necessary.
That's incredibly clever, using pure logic and geometry.
It's an early and profoundly insightful understanding of symmetry as a cosmic principle. A powerful aha moment for anyone considering it back then. It completely eliminates the need for any external support, replacing it with pure rational geometry. A solution born of philosophical abstraction, not physical observation of forces.
Wow. That's a truly elegant solution, and it powerfully demonstrates how his rational mind was looking for fundamental principles and internal coherence, not just, ad hoc explanations tied to myths. So he's got the Earth floating. What about the celestial bodies? The sun, moon, stars? How did he explain their movements and appearances in this self-regulating, symmetrical universe?
Well, his model there was also quite inventive, though less accurate from our perspective, obviously. He envisioned them as massive, fiery rings, or maybe hollow tubes filled with fire, encircling the Earth.
Fiery rings.
Yeah. And what we see as the sun, moon, and stars are not the rings themselves, but rather the fire escaping through specific holes or openings in these rings or tubes.
Like cosmic peak holes.
Sort of. For instance, he proposed the sun was the fire seen through a hole in the outermost ring, the moon through a hole in the next one, and the stars through multiple smaller holes in the innermost ring.
And how did he explain things like phases of the moon or eclipses?
He reasoned that the different sizes of these openings, or perhaps temporary blockages of them, would explain the varying brightness of stars, the distinct phases of the moon as the opening changes its appearance or gets partially blocked, and even eclipses when one ring or its opening was obstructed by another, or maybe by vapors rising from the Earth.
Huh. It's intricate.
It is. And while scientifically primitive by our standards, we know the Earth isn't the center, celestial bodies aren't fiery rings, it demonstrates a systematic, albeit pre-scientific attempt to model the heavens with a coherent mechanical explanation. Again, moving away from just accepting them as divine lights or chariots pulled by gods.
Right, and all of this, the whole cosmos, formed naturally from the ape run.
That was the core idea. The universe itself, with its hot and cold elements separating out, formed through that spontaneous process of apocrysis from the Aperon. It emphasizes its natural, non-mythological origin, reinforcing the idea of a self-generating, self-regulating cosmos.
That's a truly ingenious, almost architectural vision for the cosmos. But perhaps even more astonishing, given the prevailing views of creation and fixed species at the time, are his ideas about life's origins. So what does this all mean? We're talking about an idea of evolution over 2,500 years before Darwin. This is truly mind-blowing for the 6th century BCE. How did he arrive at such a notion without any concept of genetic inheritance or natural selection?
His biological ideas are indeed remarkable, yeah. They deserve special attention because they demonstrate his consistent drive for naturalistic explanations for everything. Anaximander posited that life first emerged in the sea in a primordial wet environment.
Which actually lines up pretty well with modern
It
science.
does, remarkably so.
Hmm.
But even more astonishing was his theory regarding human evolution, which he seems to have reasoned out based on observation of human vulnerability. He believed that humans, in their earliest forms, must have evolved from fish-like creatures.
Fish-like creatures, why?
His reasoning was quite astute for his era. He observed that human infants are born utterly helpless, right? They require a prolonged period of care and nurture. This would make immediate survival in a harsh, primitive land environment incredibly difficult, if not impossible.
True. Babies need a lot of help.
Exactly. Therefore, he concluded that humans must have developed and matured within the sea, protected by some kind of fish-like or perhaps a primitive aquatic animal form, maybe something that could provide for its young internally or shelter them, much like some fish or sharks give birth to live young that are already somewhat developed.
So they grew up inside these fish-like beings.
That seems to be the gist of the reports we have. Only after reaching a stage where they were capable of surviving independently on land, having outgrown their protective aquatic form, did they migrate from the sea. What's truly fascinating here is not just the idea itself, the notion that life develops and changes over time, but the underlying principle that drives it, that life develops and adapts through natural processes, through a progression of forms, rather than by a singular divine fiat or an instant creation of fixed species.
Yeah, it's the process thinking that's key.
It fundamentally challenges assumptions about static, unchanging species and points towards a dynamic, changing natural world where beings adapt and evolve over time to their environment, driven by the demands of survival. It's a profound departure from creation myths and speaks to his consistent, unwavering search for natural, rational explanations for everything he observed.
It's genuinely incredible how his abstract, rational mind pushed him to these conclusions, even without the observational tools or cumulative knowledge of modern science. And that brings us to the next point. He wasn't just a purely theoretical philosopher, someone lost in abstract thought. He made very practical, observational contributions as well. He truly was a practical philosopher, integrating theory with observation.
Yes, his contributions profoundly went beyond pure speculation or abstract philosophical debates. He was deeply engaged with the practical application of knowledge, which again highlights his proto-scientific nature, his commitment to understanding the how as much as the why.
And one of the most famous examples of that practical application is his reputed creation of the first known world map. What was the significance of that, especially for a city like Miletus?
Right, the creation of the first known world map is attributed to Anaximander. And this wasn't just, an intellectual exercise or a curious drawing. It had immense practical utility, particularly for his home city.
For trade and navigation?
Exactly. For a commercial hub like Miletus, deeply reliant on extensive maritime navigation, long-distance trade, even military expeditions, a map providing a visual, ordered representation of known lands and sea routes would have been an invaluable strategic and economic tool.
It standardizes things.
It systematized geographical knowledge, allowed for better planning of voyages, provided a shared reference for merchants and sailors. It profoundly showcased the direct application of his intellectual curiosity and rational ordering principles to the concrete economic and practical needs of his city. It proved that theoretical brilliance could yield tangible benefits.
So he wasn't just thinking big, abstract thoughts. He was literally looking at the sky and trying to figure out how it worked in a systematic way without resorting to stories about angry gods or whimsical divine actions. And he was building practical tools, creating something that would genuinely help his city thrive. What about his astronomical innovations beyond the cosmic model we discussed earlier?
Indeed. He's widely credited with introducing the gnomon, that simple sundial we mentioned, to Greece. It was a tool likely adopted from Babylonian or Egyptian practices, but he applied it systematically.
Not just a novelty, then.
Not at all. It was a fundamental instrument for systematic observation and measurement. By meticulously observing the length and direction of the shadow cast by a vertical stick, Anaximander and others could track the sun's apparent path through the year with unprecedented accuracy for the time.
So they could figure out solstices, equinoxes.
Exactly. Determine the solstices and equinoxes. Measure precise timings for the seasons. More accurately mark the passage of time throughout the day. This systematic, quantitative observation was absolutely crucial for agriculture, for navigation, and for providing empirical data that could challenge purely mythological or anecdotal explanations of celestial movements. It marked a significant step towards observational astronomy.
And he looked at weather, too.
Yes. Furthermore, he engaged in early meteorology. He made a concerted effort to provide natural explanations for phenomena like rain, wind, and lightning, again consciously moving away from mythological causes like divine wrath.
Did he have specific theories?
He did. For lightning, he specifically theorized that it resulted from the forceful collision of clouds, which is an incredibly insightful hypothesis for his time, remarkably close, in principle, to our understanding of static discharge.
That's amazing. So he's observing, he's measuring, he's theorizing natural causes, and he's doing it all systematically. This sounds an awful lot like the very early stirrings of the scientific method, even if formal experimentation wasn't a commonplace practice yet.
Absolutely. His method involved a crucial and powerful combination of meticulous observation with rigorous rational speculation. While formal, controlled experimental science as we know it hadn't yet developed, this intellectual approach grounding theoretical inquiry in observable phenomena and seeking logical, consistent explanations laid a crucial theoretical groundwork for the scientific method that would emerge much later.
And that explanation for why the Earth doesn't fall is a perfect example, right?
Upon example of his early critical thinking, yes. His response to why the Earth doesn't fall. Instead of saying, because the gods hold it up or it rests on something, he sought a rational explanation based on a fundamental principle symmetry, which we discussed.
Yeah.
This demonstrates a mind committed to logical coherence, seeking explanations based on the inherent nature of things rather than external arbitrary forces. This relentless pursuit of rational, immanent explanations for natural phenomena, consciously rejecting divine or arbitrary causes, is the very essence of the scientific spirit, even in its nascent form.
It's truly astonishing to think how much he pioneered, how many intellectual doors he opened with just the power of his mind and careful observation. And this leads us directly to his enduring legacy. He built upon Thales, yes, but his audacious leap with the Aperon seems to have truly set the stage for all Western philosophy and science that came after.
Without a doubt. Anaximander didn't just incrementally build on Thales. He radically advanced his teacher's water principle to the far more abstract and profound Aperon. He pushed the boundaries of philosophical abstraction in a way that resonated for centuries.
And that influenced others.
Oh, definitely. This foundational shift paved the way for countless future philosophical developments. His ideas directly influenced immediate successors like Anaximenes, who chose air as his arche, but continued that Milesian tradition of seeking a natural principle. And beyond that, his concepts really set the stage for more complex philosophical systems. Think about Pythagoras' later idea of a mathematically ordered universe.
Numbers ruling everything.
Right. Or Heraclitus' profound philosophy of constant change and the unity of opposites, ideas that definitely echo Anaximander's dynamic Aperon and his concept of cosmic justice. He truly put Western thought on a new, more abstract and systematic trajectory.
So he transformed the fundamental philosophical question from what thing is the world made of to something more like what principle or underlying reality is the world made of.
Precisely that. And his vision of the universe as a cosmos, a rationally comprehensible, orderly, and self-regulating system, became a cornerstone of Western philosophy and science. It's the foundational idea that the universe is not chaotic, not ultimately arbitrary, but understandable, governed by inherent principles that human reason can, however imperfectly, uncover.
That's a very optimistic view, isn't it, that we can actually figure things out?
It is deeply optimistic, yes, and it fueled centuries of inquiry, which brings up an important question for us to consider. Without Anaximander's abstract leap with the Aperon, this bold move beyond the immediately observable, would later Greek philosophy have found its way to the towering abstract systems of Plato's forms, those perfect, unchanging ideas that underlie reality, or Aristotle's prime mover, the ultimate cause of motion and being?
That's a big question.
Anaximander established a crucial precedent for seeking principles beyond the immediately physical and observable. He moved philosophy into the realm of metaphysics and the pursuit of universal abstract truths. It's almost as if he opened a conceptual door that philosophers, scientists, and curious minds are still walking through and exploring today.
So what does this all mean for us thousands of years later as we navigate our own complex world. It means that every time we look for a natural explanation for something, whether it's a weather pattern or a biological process, or think about how systems self-regulate and find their own balance, be it in nature, economics, or even social dynamics, we're echoing the very first intellectual notes struck by audacious thinkers like Anaximander.
Hmm.
His audacious intellectual leaps, his pursuit of underlying abstract principles, his attempts at systematic explanation, his steadfast rejection of simple mythological answers, laid the essential groundwork for the scientific method and the rational inquiry that we rely on so fundamentally today.
Think about it. The idea that the Earth floats in space, or that life evolves from simpler forms, or that the universe operates according to inherent balancing laws.
Yeah.
These are foundational concepts that profoundly shape our modern worldview. And they found their very first articulated, reasoned expressions in the incredible mind of Anaximander.
Yeah.
His contribution wasn't just a stepping stone. It was a giant leap for human intellectual development.
What an incredible journey we've taken through the mind of Anaximander. We've seen how he dared to introduce the abstract principle of the apeiron as the boundless, indeterminate source of all existence, moving beyond purely material explanations.
Yeah, that leap into abstraction was key.
Yeah.
And we explored his profound vision of a universe as a cosmos, an ordered and beautiful system governed by that fascinating concept of cosmic justice, where imbalances are naturally rectified over time.
And we touched upon his surprisingly modern cosmological insights, from the Earth floating unsupported in the center of the universe due to the principle of symmetry,
Which is still just amazing to think about.
to his astonishingly prescient ideas about life emerging from the sea and human evolution from fish-like creatures, demonstrating a profound and naturalistic worldview.
Absolutely. And crucially, we understood his foundational role in that momentous shift from mythos to logos, where observation, systematic reasoning, and rational speculation began to replace divine explanations for natural phenomena.
He wasn't just a philosopher in the modern sense, but a polymath, a cartographer and astronomer, a true early scientist integrating theoretical thought with practical observation.
His legacy is nothing less than the very foundation of rational understanding in the West, setting the intellectual stage for nearly all scientific and philosophical inquiry that has followed, urging us always to look beyond the immediate and the obvious.
So, here's a final thought for you to ponder as you go about your day. Anaximander dared to imagine a universe that was self-regulating and fundamentally rational, governed by discernible laws rather than the unpredictable whims of gods. He did this with limited tools, relying primarily on observation and the sheer power of pure reason. What does that tell us about the boundless potential of the human mind to grasp seemingly infinite complexities, even when the answers aren't immediately apparent or directly testable?
And maybe, what other unseen principles might govern our reality, waiting patiently to be uncovered by equally audacious intellectual leaps, much like the apeiron was all those centuries ago?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparks your own curiosity to explore the limitless possibilities of knowledge and inspires you to look for the hidden order in the world around you. We'll see you next time.